Hi everybody, and welcome to Lost Genre Mother-in-Law Stories. We've known from some stories that some mother-in-laws can be difficult. Others, on the other hand, can go really crazy with being controlling. A short side note before we get started. I have another channel called Lost Genre IATA Daily, where you will find every day 3 videos, one for each of the top posts from Am I the A-hole with the top comments as well. So if you like Am I the A-hole content, go to the description where you'll find a link for this channel and go subscribe and check out the content. Anyways, let's get started with the first story. My mother-in-law is a fruitcake. Unfortunately, I didn't really grasp it until recently. I have been on the good end of the relationship from the beginning. My mother-in-law showers me with compliments, tells my mom and her friends how great I am, and generally treats me really great. Sound too good to be true? Well, it is. I have finally, after years of good treatment, seen the real her. My dear husband did not get along with his mom for years before he met me. Big messy divorce where he was caught in the middle, but there's more. My mother-in-law blames my dear husband for the divorce from his father and her subsequent unhappiness. The real reason? She was running around with some guy and got caught by my dear husband, and he wouldn't cover for her after the first 4 months anyway, when he finally broke down and told his dad because she wouldn't end the affair. My mother-in-law told him then that she wished he had never been born. She married because she was pregnant with him and that she hated him. I can't believe he ever talked to her again after that. This woman talks badly about everyone she knows and is never happy with anything. She poisoned my dear husband and his siblings against their paternal grandparents for years. My dear husband has a lot of regret that he never was close to them when they were living, but he sees now that it was his mom's doing. My dear husband has 2 siblings. Both are really screwed up emotionally, no doubt because of mother-in-law. My sister-in-law is very nice, but she doesn't ever let anyone know what she is thinking about anything, is very much of a homebody, and I fear may end up being a recluse in a few years. She is divorced with 1 child, and my brother-in-law has been living with her temporarily. My brother-in-law is a recovering alcoholic, but he is getting his life straightened out. He just told his mom that he is planning to move in January to go back and finish college, and when he did, my mother-in-law gave my brother-in-law a big guilt trip about leaving sister-in-law's child. It's not his child, he's just an uncle. About 3 years ago, we, mother-in-law, sister-in-law, dear husband, and I, made a deal to not give each other presents at Christmas, and to only buy presents for sister-in-law's kid. This because sister-in-law and mother-in-law didn't have much money. We have held to this deal. Mother-in-law broke the deal last Christmas and bought us gifts. Lately, she has called my dear husband cheap and materialistic to his siblings. When he confronted her, she said she was hurt because he didn't get her a Christmas present. Of course, she pointed out that father-in-law and my parents got gifts. He also, finally, told her after 13 years that he doesn't want to talk to her anymore. He was restraining himself from all the things he really wanted to say. She gave him a big sob story about how Christians forgive and how everyone else has forgiven her, why can't he? For starters, she has never apologized for saying, "I hate you." My dear husband wants to cut her off completely. He says that having my family, who adore him, and me to love him is good enough for him. This whole situation just breaks my heart because my dear husband has clearly suffered for years. If you're wondering why my mother-in-law is nice to me, I think it's because I'm the best link she has to her son. He has been a lot nicer to her since we've been together. I expect that if he cuts her off, I'll be the next target. I just didn't see it until now. Well, that's an odd mother-in-law story, right? Mother-in-law's nice, but is only nice because she's bad to her own son? Just imagine the emotional weight this woman put on his son by blaming him to be the cause of the divorce when it was her that was fooling around. Honestly, who does that to a kid? I think it's great that OP's husband has finally decided to cut ties with that woman. What do you guys think? Alright, let's move on to the next story. My bad relationship with my mother-in-law began shortly after I began dating my now husband. We were both 18 when we began dating. We're now in our mid-20s and have been married for 5 years. The first time I met my mother-in-law, I found her to be very pleasant. Dear husband was in university at the time and living at home with his parents. We were from different cities, about an hour's drive apart. We would see each other mostly on weekends. After about 2 trips into the city to visit him at his parents' house, mother-in-law began interfering in our relationship. For example, he and I would have plans to see a movie, and then head out for dinner afterwards. But when I would arrive at the house, he would inform me that his mom thinks it would be so nice if the whole family and I went to the movies together. Sounds strange to you? It sure did to me. Being the new girlfriend and not wanting to start trouble, I went along with the idea, and we put off our second date to the next weekend. On that one, mother-in-law decided to shuffle things around on us again. My boyfriend informed me when I arrived at the front door that Mom really wants us to have dinner at home tonight. I was slightly irritated by this, seeing that it was the second date in a row she had meddled with. I told him that I really would rather go out for dinner alone that night, but he insisted that Mom would be really hurt if we refused. So, guess where we ended up for dinner? I thought dinner went fine. To my surprise, we politely chatted and laughed a little. I went home afterwards thinking, gee, that wasn't so bad. But after checking my email when I got home, I found another story. My boyfriend had written me a long message with the subject being, oh boy, sad face. It turns out, after I drove off that night, his parents sat him down in the living room for a big talk. His mother said she was upset at a number of things. Here's a condensed list. First, her son and I were seeing too much of each other. After 3 dates over a month's time, 2 of which we were in the presence of his entire family the whole time. Second, she and her husband were very upset with the fact that boyfriend and I had been holding hands at the dinner table. She said, it's uncomfortable making to your daddy and I. Is it relevant to point out that we absolutely did not hold hands at the table? I guess because all 4 hands were not visible at all times, we must have been up to something. Third, his mother also said she noticed that I wasn't very receptive to doing family things. It asked throwing away dinner and a movie along with my boyfriend to go with his parents and little sister. She said that if he was going to date me, I'd better get used to the idea that they had a very close family and they do many family things together, and I'd be going on a lot more if I was interested in staying with him. Since we've been married, things have been a bit better, but I attribute all the improvements to the fact that we've moved over 1,000 miles away from his family. During our engagement, we made the mistake of letting his parents book a hotel room for us when we were meeting up with them while they were on vacation on the West Coast. We were already living together at the time, but nonetheless, they thought it would be appropriate for us to have the room directly across from the front desk at the bed and breakfast. Not to mention, selecting the only suite furnished with 2 single beds at opposite ends of the room. Mother-in-law gleefully asked me after we checked in, so, how do you like the room? Another thing that annoys me about her is that she likes to speak in French to my dear husband right in front of me, not knowing I speak and understand French myself. Dear husband's whole family is American with British heritage, but somewhere along the line, mother-in-law and father-in-law thought it would be great if they all learned another language. Dear husband and his sister were put in a French immersion school from grade school through high school. When we were first dating, mother-in-law would frequently say to him in French in front of me, make sure you're home by 11. I'll be waiting up for you, and I want to know how everything went. Right after telling us we were welcome to stay out as long as we liked and to have lots of fun. Remember to tell me exactly what your girlfriend said to blank. Make sure you bring her back here before she leaves for home. I want to ask her how the date went. And another naughty sidebar. Whenever dear husband or the both of us got out of state, Mother-in-law phones and emails at least 4 times to get our flight itineraries so she can track our flight online. She's found a website that will show you where the plane is in the sky and when it's scheduled to land, how fast it's going, etc. Is that nutty or what? The day after we return home, if not the day of the return, she calls us up and asks a ton of questions about the trip. Then she asks her son to send her copies of all of our vacation pictures for the whole family to see. That is something that really makes me angry. I'm a private person, but not unreasonably so. I find it very irritating to have our private life dug into like this. To top it all off, she's desperately trying to get a job at the company my dear husband works for. She's even asked if there are any jobs in his building that she'd be suited for. Dear Lord. I hope I was able to convey OP's clear frustration about her mother-in-law. Now that is a crazy controlling mother-in-law. Like, I get it, you want to know what's going on in your son's life. But this woman wants to know everything that's going on in their lives, since the start with sabotaging their dates. That made me think about some sort of like a chaperone kind of deal, you know? Also, tracking their flights in that website and then asking for all of the vacation pictures for them to see what was going on. Dude, no. That woman has serious control issues and it's gonna blow up in her face. What do you guys think? Alright, now let's move on to the last story. When I first met my future in-laws, they seemed quite charming. I was very wrong. My future mother-in-law is a passive-aggressive bee who is the center of all family functions. My future father-in-law is a nice but spineless yes man to her. This story, however, is mostly about my future sister-in-law. Future sister-in-law was breaking up with a potentially dangerous de facto, and she needed a place to go. She didn't get along well with her mother, so she asked if she could stay with us in our 2-bedroom apartment. I sensed the urgency of her situation. I said that she could stay here up to 6 weeks, rent-free, on the proviso that she looked for another place when she felt up to it, and paid her share of the bills. She said, sure. After we had dropped her off, future dear husband said he wouldn't have offered her the place, as she has terrible mood swings. He had mentioned something like that a few months back, but considering how nice she was at the time, it didn't look to be a problem. Anyway, the offer had been made. A few weeks later, future mother-in-law called to say that future sister-in-law's relationship had broken up and she needed a place to stay. We agreed and helped her move her stuff out. At first, it went well, as I am, by nature, a kind but fair person. I was going out of my way for her, and it was good to have some company when future dear husband was away. Future sister-in-law slept through the day instead of going to college, and generally did no housework. This bugged me a little because she wasn't paying rent, and I felt she should be contributing to the household in some way. Anyway, I let it go. Future sister-in-law began to stomp around the house. We wanted to know what was bothering her, but when we approached her, she would say, "I'm sorry for being such an inconvenience, and I'm moving out." Cut to us standing there with cartoon question marks above our heads trying to figure out what she was talking about. We assured her that she wasn't an inconvenience and that we liked her, etc. When it came time for her to listen to our constructive criticism, because frankly, she was being a bee, she walked away exclaiming that she was moving out. I felt genuinely bad for her, but I figured out that would be a good thing as she didn't seem to be grateful for what we had done. Of course, she didn't move out. That was all wordplay to make us look bad. She had learned her mother's manipulative ways well, and I was a lesson or two behind. She started to get worse. She was treating our things like they were her own and kept sulking and stomping around. And just when I was about ready to stomp her, she would be all nice again. So naturally, now that everything was back to normal, we didn't really want to push her because she's very nice when she is nice. One day during her stay, future dear husband and I went to see my parents. And when we came back, we found future father-in-law, future mother-in-law, and future sister-in-law all sitting at our table. Future sister-in-law made a great display of giving me this crappy vegetarian cookbook. And future mother-in-law made a great display of how great the book was, despite the fact that she only ever seems to cook meat. Those two would make a great tag team if it wasn't so fake. When the parents left, I walked into our bedroom and discovered that some fish were dead. I pointed this out and sister-in-law acted surprised and immediately said, "Well, it wasn't me." And I responded with, "Of course it wasn't." And then I learned that it was her. The heater had been cranked up to 30 degrees Celsius. The damage was done, and so they all died. Later, father-in-law said that he had pointed out that fish were dead, so sister-in-law must have known earlier. I couldn't take her behavior anymore, so we went to future mother-in-law's place to ask them to take her. I didn't get a word in before she started laying into me. I waited for her to say her piece, but she didn't stop. She kept going. Literally 15 minutes later, when I went to tell my side of the story, I couldn't. My emotions had caught up with me and I had to go outside because I was too angry to cry in front of them. Future mother-in-law then needed to be comforted by future dear husband because of whatever reason. In reality, it was because she knew she had crossed the line and wanted to make sure she hadn't alienated future dear husband. I was mad because that isn't how it works. I listened to her, she is supposed to listen to me. As if. Instead, she took scrawny sister-in-law's word, she is a known liar, over mine. Future mother-in-law said that she would move sister-in-law out the next day because she knew that sister-in-law was about to get her karma if she kept pushing us. The next day, future dear husband was still mad about the way I had been treated. He told me that if future sister-in-law was out of line at all, he was going to throw her out. Needless to say, it didn't take future sister-in-law long to push her limits. She slammed the doors, and when we told her to turn the music down, etc., she threw our glasses across the room. Future dear husband got really mad and insisted that she leave immediately. She refused, and he picked her up and carried her out of the house. Mother-in-law came over and got her stuff. Future dear husband and future sister-in-law haven't spoken in months, and future mother-in-law is making me out to be the evil one. We were left with a huge electricity bill. Naturally, she has no intention to pay either. Future mother-in-law and future sister-in-law have been living together, and there has been quite a bit of friction. It looks like karma comes to those who wait. Standing applause to OP's husband for picking up that spoiled brat of a sister and putting her out of the house. Yeah, OP, you were being nice, and they just suck. She's not your problem to fix. She has parents that raised her to be the spoiled brat that she is. So, they need to deal with it, or life will, and like you say, she'll get karma. In any case, it resolved for the better. Your husband hasn't been talking to that spoiled brat of a sister, and mother-in-law has now to deal with her precious little daughter. What do you guys think? Alright, and we've reached the end of the video. So, if you liked it, go ahead and click like. If you still haven't subscribed, then just go ahead and do it. If you like the content, why not be a part of this community, right? And finally, once again, I want to encourage you guys to go visit my other channel. There's a link in the description where you will find only Am I the A-Hole content every day, the top 3 posts of the day. And having said all that, I will see you guys in the next video.